into something innocent and twist it just enough to blur the line between what's sacred and what's profane. That's why it's called the mystery of iniquity. It hides in plain sight. Even in hip hop, an art form that began as a voice for the voiceless.
Okay, we are live with Alexander Mercouris in London. Alexander, Happy New Year. This is our first live stream of the new year, and Happy New Year to everyone that is watching us. And this is our first live stream for the new year, but it's a live stream that we put together the last 10, 15 minutes to talk about the breaking news in Venezuela. So, Alexander, your thoughts on Venezuela, but Happy New Year to everyone that's watching us.
Indeed. Indeed, a very happy new year to everybody who is watching us, and it's great to be here and to do a live stream today. Now let's go straight into Venezuela, because as you know, I have time constraints today. Well, firstly, we've had this enormous build-up to this event, which took place this morning. As far as I can see, there has been no organized resistance to these American attacks. My overwhelming impression is that the Americans came in, they captured Maduro. Trump is saying it, the Venezuelans are not denying it, so I am assuming that that is true. They came in, they captured Maduro, they left. And the reports are that no Americans were killed. Now, if this is correct, then it seems to me that there has clearly been some kind of a deal done. In other words, that some people within the Venezuelan political military system have agreed to do a deal with the Americans, whereby they ditch their leader, who is Maduro. Maduro is taken by the United States, is brought to the United States, and everything else in Venezuela remains under the control of the current Venezuelan authorities. So that looks to me the deal that has probably been done, and that is my initial assumption about the situation. So a lot of theatre, a lot of attacks on bases, a lot of performative acts by helicopters flying over Caracas, but no fighting to speak of, no pictures of actual fighting, no sign of air defense missiles being launched to resist the Americans. And I'm going to suggest that this probably explains the long weeks of the United States building up its forces, but taking no apparent action apart from attacking a couple of speedboats and seizing a number of tankers. Probably over that time, some kind of very complex negotiation was underway. So that is my first guess about this.
A deal or a bribery, a payoff?
A bribery, a payoff.
Like in Syria.
Like in Syria. In fact, I'm glad you brought up Syria, because it looks to be identical. In other words, people have been bribed and brought over enough of them. There is still some kind of political authority function in Venezuela. We've had statements from the foreign minister, and we've had statements from the defense minister, but it doesn't seem to me as if there's any kind of sustained resistance at all.
Right. The defense minister so far has seemed very defiant.
Yes.
His rhetoric is defiant towards the United States. It seems like he's going to take the line of Maduro, but of course he can also be brought to the side of the U.S., I imagine, with the right pressure and the right offer. They can get the defense minister to step aside.
Yeah.
The U.S. is going to put their own people in charge.
Ultimately, of course. As I understand it, there's the vice president is still in Venezuela. He will presumably step in, and he will now be the new vice president, the new president. And while Maduro is arrested in the United States, but one can see the scenario. He will call elections. Elections will be held, and that will result in the transfer of power to the people that the United States wants. That's probably the most likely outcome to this.
A successful covert operation.
Yes. I mean, that's how it looks to me.
Yeah, a regime change, a successful covert operation. According to Mike Lee, he's spoken to Secretary Rubio. Rubio said that Maduro is going to stand trial. He's under arrest and he's going to stand trial. So, I mean, they're going to make an example of Maduro. Maduro was betrayed. That's the way it looks at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah, he was betrayed. Yeah.
He was betrayed. I mean,
So this explains the, all the signs were there that this was going to happen. The New York Times had the article about the CIA operating in Venezuela. Trump even said, this was a couple of months ago, that the CIA was operating in Venezuela covertly in Venezuela. Well, not so covert, because Trump was announcing it. We had Pam Bondi talking about the 50 million bounty on Maduro's head.
It's over.
And I think the last piece of the puzzle that they were waiting for was getting the right military officials to stand down, to betray Maduro, but also to stand down as far as air defense goes. Because there was no air defense. Yeah.
There was no air defense. There's been no sign of fighting anywhere in Venezuela. The security forces are still there. They're still operating on the ground. But as I said, there's clearly been a deal done, a bribery deal done, and it's exactly like what we saw in Syria in 2024, November.
A short-term victory for Trump.
Yes.
Medium, long-term, this is a regime change. U.S. regime change operations never turn out well. ever turn out well. They always turn into disasters.
Yes.
Will this be the exception, or is this going to lead to a power vacuum and to chaos? I mean, Guaido, okay, he's not going to be the guy, but Machado, I'm sure she's going to be one of the lead candidates to install in Venezuela as president. She's unpopular. No one likes her either.
Yes.
How do you see this playing out?
Well, this is for the long term, and I suspect for the long term this isn't going to go at all well, and it's not going to be popular with many people in Latin America either, and it's probably not going to be popular with some people in Venezuela. Today, there is probably shock across Venezuela, across Latin America, but over time, the resistance will grow, and this will not look good in the world in general. We see that even people like Erdogan now are coming out and are condemning this. And I suspect that in time, as I said, we will see that the problems in Venezuela from this point on with the United States will only begin. This is the way neocon operations, this is a neocon operation, by the way. This is the way neocon operations always go. They start strong. They start with, lots of bangs and flashes, the helicopters flying in, the missiles being launched, the dramatic act, the capture of the president, the overturning of these statues. You remember that happened in Baghdad. And then from that moment on, it starts to go downhill. And I suspect that's exactly what's going to happen in Venezuela. It's going to take time. It's going to probably be a prolonged affair. I would have thought that Machado, who's clearly been designated as the person who will take over, that she will go into Venezuela. She will try to return things to where they were before Hugo Chavez, back in the 90s, emerged on the political scene in Venezuela. She will very quickly discover that there is enormous resistance inside Venezuela to returning to that period, pre-Chavez period. Chavez did carry out deep changes inside Venezuela, and Venezuelan society has changed as a result of that. So it will be like what was once said about the Bobans. They've returned, they've learnt nothing, forgotten nothing, and eventually it all begins to go wrong. But it will probably take time to work out. In the short term, Trump has got Maduro. Maduro will stand trial, and the Americans have achieved, for the time being, their objective, which is to gain control of Venezuela, ultimately of its oil, and, well, we'll see where that goes.
They get control of Venezuela's oil. They can now put the squeeze on Cuba as well, which is Rubio's main goal.
Yes.
And this makes, actually, China was just there a couple of hours ago. This makes China look really bad.
Yes.
This makes Russia, BRICS, Iran, they all come out of this looking completely clueless and lost.
Yes, indeed. Well, I mean, I think if I may say so, people tend to focus a lot on Russia, but the big important ally of Venezuela was in fact China. China was the country that had.
They were just there meeting with Maduro a couple of hours
exactly.
ago, Alexander.
And they were the people who were buying Venezuela's oil. They were the people whose tankers were being seized. They were the people who were providing the economic assistance. So they come out looking very embarrassed from this affair. And but we've discussed this many times. For the time being, despite the fact that the power of the BRICS continues to grow, they do not have the kind of power projection capabilities that the United States does. The United States still has a matchless capability to deploy forces everywhere around the world. It's got bases in every place. It's still got the world's biggest fleet. Well, maybe not biggest fleet in terms of numbers, but biggest fleet in terms of aircraft carriers and power. And that gives the United States, in these sort of operations, an advantage. China, Russia, very strong in their own neighborhoods, but they can't project power, military power, in Latin America in this sort of way.
Well, it's not only Latin America, China, and Russia.
Yes.
To a lesser extent Iran, but let's stay with China and Russia. They still believe that there's some sort of an international law or rules-based order. They still buy into this. They buy into the UN. They buy into the Security Council. Russia goes on and on and on about Trump, the neutral mediator, the negotiator.
Well, indeed.
They still buy into all of this.
Well, indeed.
And they haven't woken up to the fact that there is no international law. There is no international rules-based order. We are moving into a world. No, we are in a world of chaos.
Yes.
A world of piracy, a world where anything goes, especially when you're a great power. Call it the bombing of pipelines. If you want to bomb pipelines, bomb the pipelines. If you want to seize tankers, seize the tankers. If you want to do decapitation strikes, if you want to bomb a country to protect the Christians or the Muslims or whoever, if you want to go after scientists, there is no rule. If you want to kidnap the leader of a sovereign country, and that's what this is. I mean, the way words are used, the capture of Maduro. This wasn't a capture.
No.
It was a kidnapping.
Absolutely, yes.
They kidnapped the leader of a sovereign country.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's what they did, whether you like Maduro or not. I mean, I don't think that's the issue. I mean, you're a lawyer. You understand these things.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure this goes against all kinds of international law.
To put it mildly.
This is the world we're moving into. This is the world that we're in, actually.
The security strategy review basically said it. I mean, this is a game now played between great powers. It's purely, the United States has given up. This is what the security strategy review said. The United States has given up its quest for world hegemony. It understands it no longer has the power to do that. It's also given up on the rules-based international order, such as it was. Remember all that? They've given up on that. They've given up on international law as such. They're talking purely about great powers and spheres of influence. We talked about that back early in January. Was it January, February? Spheres of influence. It's now the accepted thing. And when you say this, predatory great powers, predatory against their own allies too. Greenland as well. I mean, we talked this well. I mean, they're going. I mean, at some point, if the United States can do this in Venezuela, they'll do this in Greenland too. I mean, they'll simply move in, they'll take over, and Denmark won't be happy. But that's what they will eventually do, because the Americans understand that controlling the world is no longer possible. The other side is too strong. There's too many players, too many powerful players to do that. But you use increasingly ruthless actions to maintain control of what you consider of core importance to yourself. So that's the world that we're going to see. And I'm going to make a prediction, by the way. If Trump is defeated in 2028, whatever Democrat takes over, if it is a Democrat, when I say Trump, the Republic is losing 2028, the Democrats will continue along the same course. It is an adaptation to the power realities of the world today.
Yeah, foreign policy based on trickery. Been saying this for
duplicity,
a good year now.
Duplicity and all of that, and all of that, duplicity and a high degree of violence as well.
Well, allegedly going after Putin's residence with the drones.
Yeah.
Allegedly, the CIA tells us otherwise, and I tend to believe everything that the CIA is saying. But anyway,
Absolutely.
right.
I mean,
as Russia's negotiating with the pragmatic, rational Trump,
yes,
right?
Yes. I mean, there is. I mean, with other great powers, the U.S. does prefer some degree of diplomatic contact because even let's like this. I mean, even if they'd killed Putin, it wouldn't have made any fundamental difference to the power realities. It would have made that mean a very dangerous situation. The same with China. We see that China has the power to push back against the United States. They did so. So they have to work to some extent to try to maintain some kind of stability with the other great powers. But in their own neighborhood, they are prepared to act ruthlessly, and rules really don't apply.
True, but even outside their neighborhood, they've given 2 huge weapons packages to Taiwan.
Yeah.
We're nowhere near their neighborhood. We have all kinds of chaos breaking out in China's neighborhood, right?
Absolutely.
Cambodia, Thailand, for example, Myanmar. So there's all kinds of chaos, and of course you have Project Ukraine, and the U.S. is the force behind the proxy war, and once again the New York Times has admitted that it is the U.S. and the CIA that is driving the attack.
Yes, I know.
on tankers and refineries. This is not me saying this.
No, indeed. Now on
and the CIA. So I mean, the U.S. has no problem going into the neighborhoods of the other great powers as well. If they have to, they'll do it.
Oh, absolutely, because they still have that power projection capability, which the other great powers don't. Now, on this topic of oil and oil trade, this is where, in a kind of a way, the Russians come out beneficiaries, because China has been sourcing a significant amount of its oil from Venezuela recently, especially heavy crude. And remember, there's a difference between heavy crude and light crude. So China buying heavy crude from Venezuela, soon it will lose access to heavy crude from Venezuela. So it is going to have to rely more on Russia. So Russia's leverage over China increases.
Yeah, China completely embarrassed by this.
Yes.
Given that they had their guy in Venezuela just a few hours ago.
Well, indeed, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nikos, let's get to some questions.
Yes, I have to be fair, just to say.
Yeah, let's just run through these quick and we'll end this live stream. I don't even know where to begin. I will express my general thoughts on Russia and President Putin on your next stream, but today Venezuela has fallen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do you foresee the Russia-Ukraine war spiraling into a bigger war when Ukraine inevitably collapses?
There's much talk about this in Russia itself, by the way. Just to say, there's been discussion about what might happen if Ukraine does indeed collapse.
Yeah. How will Russia and China now react to it?
They will. I've already discussed this. China is now going to have to turn to Russia for more of its crude oil, and they will bind together more closely. But from their point of view, I think this is just important to say. Venezuela is not a core country. Eurasia is where they are. The Chinese, what they're going to have to do if they really want to defend their maritime interests. Remember, China is by far the biggest maritime trading power. I suspect they're going to accelerate their fleet construction.
Yeah. OMG Puppy says that makes sense. The general's bribed because they have AA tech and never used it. Helicopters hovering over a city, shooting it up, not even shoulder-fired missiles. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Can we somehow see Israel's role here? Maduro condemned Israel. The Northeast South America is pro-Palestine. U.S. foreign policy, Israeli foreign policy. Netanyahu was just at Mar-a-Lago, so.
Yeah, I mean, there may have been a role played, but I mean, I don't think the United States needed. I don't think we needed Israel for the United States to act in the way that we did. I mean, speaking very.
Hermitage Prepper says secure Venezuela for when Iran closes Hormuz.
Well, the oil types are different, and I think this is the best thing to say.
Yeah. Flying Boar says Putin is naive and stupid, plain and
That last
simple.
game was dangerous.
No, I don't think he's
He got
either
the lead, that was
naive
kind of
nor
upset.
stupid. What could
He's really
Russia
attacked,
practically
yeah.
do to assist Venezuela? The country that might just possibly have been able to take some action was China, and China didn't. The Chinese remain very focused on their own neighborhood, which is Taiwan. And the Russians have to be, because they don't have the reach that China and Russia do. Sorry, that the United States does, sorry.
Yeah. Stephen Hightower says, good Lord, can no one hold against or challenge the U.S. hegemony? As a U.S. citizen, I'm so tired of the same story. Neocons and Zionists need to go.
Maybe I'll just
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about who can hold it back, lots of people in the world are holding it back. But if you want to stop this kind of policy, it has to be done from within the United States. The United States now owns Venezuela, with all the problems that will bring in its wake. Remember, we had exactly the same discussions after Syria collapsed. Syria has not turned out well. Al-Jalani's government is failing. It does not control most of the country. Violence is intensifying there. IS is returning, and Al-Jalani is turning to the Russians for help. So, bear in mind that things are not always straightforward. Venezuela, closer to the United States, more in its neighborhood, if you like. I think that perhaps the Americans have more chances of getting a grip on Venezuela than they do on Syria. Syria has always been very problematic. But don't assume this is over. It might only just have started. And that would be very typical of these operations.
OG Wall says, good day. Amadeus says, I hope the Yankee casualty hits 5 figures, 0 casualties.
I was going to say,
John says the Russian military and Putin are thinking that was pretty badass comrades.
well, as far as they're probably thinking is, again, I don't think they had many expectations of what Venezuela could do. And they must by now know that the Americans have this ability to leverage power in places like Venezuela and to bribe officials in places like there too. To repeat again, the Russians have said, and we shouldn't challenge this, that Venezuela never asked Russia to help.
Then I gotta go here.
Yeah. Matthew says, was that a yes or no to a larger European war?
Well, I said possibly. Possibly.
Heroku, thank you for that. Super chat. Neil says, when are you guys making a video on Iran's situation?
We will
soon?
very soon, very soon.
It will be up. Amadeus says, I thought Russia and China provided AA.
Well, of course they did, but if the soldiers who are operating it are all right, well,
It wasn't used.
wasn't
Just like
used.
Syria, there
I think I can still
people
get
were
eight,
paid off.
which is what does me work.
It's that simple.
Yes.
Maduro got sent off to the U.S. The USA has not got Venezuela in the bag yet. No, it's just beginning. Everything's beginning now.
Exactly.
But this is a short-term covert
Absolutely.
operational success. It's not a U.S. military. This is a covert operational success.
Yes.
And other countries should take notice. Lieutenant General says President Putin should have just taken Zelensky then.
Well, again,
I gotta review that.
this is the fundamental issue. The United States and Europe have secure transit lines to Ukraine. Killing or removing Zelensky would have simply resulted in somebody else, very like him, controlled by the Americans and the Europeans taking control. What would the benefit for the Russians of that have been? Putin has actually discussed that. He says, we have an irrational and incompetent leader in place. From our point of view, better keep him there.
Miss Texas G says, is it possible that the Chinese arranged for Maduro to be given an out?
It may very well. I mean, that this is a
Not
theory
because of Rubio's. Well,
circulating that the Chinese met with Maduro in order to tell him to give himself up. I don't believe that, actually.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's possible.
maybe, but Maduro is
Yeah.
saying that he's going to be
He's gonna try to
put on
go
trial.
there.
Rubio.
Trump.
Rubio is
Rubio.
saying that he's going to
Yes.
be put on trial.
I don't believe that, actually. I mean, I have to say that.
A couple more. Why not? The USA are the bad guys. You want them to win?
No, we don't want them to win. We are, I mean, speaking for myself, I'm appalled by this sort of thing. I always have felt that when it came to a contest between the United States and Venezuela, all the odds were on the American side. Where I was surprised with Venezuela, if I have to say this, is that it has taken this long. Just to say.
USA Now says a minority of MAGA are warmongers. It's coming from locals.
Oh, true enough.
Let me get to the rest, Alexander. I'm upset. It started right as I was heading to work. Now I am supposed to monitor the situation. I'm on lunch now.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Tony. Pinyamamba, thank you for that. Super chat. Elza says, wow, what a start to the new year, gentlemen. My wish for 2026 is that you look out for your health and well-being. Thank you for your amazing work. Thank you for that,
Yes.
Elza. Matthew says, good Lord, time to start panicking in Europe by the sound of things. Will Russia renuclearize Cuba or South America?
Well, they won't renuclearize Cuba because that would be a dramatic escalation which would lead to unpredictable events. But here I think is where the Russians and the Chinese need to make a decision because, of course, Cuba is a totemic place. The regime there is much more solid. I call it the regime. The government there is far more solid, in my opinion, than the one in Venezuela is. And they can... we have economic problems, but certainly not the kind of hyperinflation that there has been in Venezuela. So the question is, what do the Russians and the Chinese do? And again, what do the Cubans do? Because just as Venezuela did not ask for Russian and Chinese help, certainly not Russian help, Cuba rejected it. I mean, the Russians offered them oil, and they wouldn't take it because they wanted the oil from Venezuela instead, because they had this close connection to Venezuela. Now, as I said, the Cubans need to make decisions about what they're going to do, and the Russians and the Chinese need to decide what steps they're going to take with Cuba as well, and whether the deal that was done between the United States and the Soviet Union in 1962 is still in force.
Nigel says, all the best for 2026, the Durant Gang.
Thanks.
Amadeus says, then cheer for Venezuelan accuracy.
Yeah.
Okay. I reckon, from Brent, I reckon there's long-term planning here. USA consolidating power in the Western Hemisphere. It's reducing energy supplies to China. It's attempting to break Iran away from Sino-Russia, setting pieces on the board, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what, that's what the neocons always do. They're always playing chess. It doesn't mean that the chess game is ever successful, because human beings are not chess pieces, and nor are states. Just to say, that's where the neocons go wrong.
Nico says, as I've said before, and you don't believe me, the West is willing to do anything, even nuclear war, to win. We hype China, but what have they done?
Well, they've done an awful lot. I mean, if I may say so. I mean, they've transformed their country and society. They've become a major economic power. They've expanded their influence in places like Africa, and they're building the world's biggest fleet. So they're doing lots of things, and they won the trade conflict with the United States last year. So we can't say that China hasn't done anything, but it doesn't have the power at the present time to interfere in places like Latin America. What I think this is going to do, by the way, and this is something I've been thinking about this over the course of this program, and I've been thinking about the things that, I have these discussions with Sofia Midkiff. Apparently, the Chinese exercises around Taiwan are becoming ever more sophisticated and ever bigger in scale, and they are becoming closer and closer to dress rehearsals. So, given the direction of travel with the United States, I would not be surprised if the Chinese are now going to start to say to themselves, we have to take action with Taiwan soon, because if we don't, given that this is a game of all against all, things might start to get particularly dangerous there. It's been entirely unreported, but China also seized a cargo ship ferrying arms to Taiwan. It was all over the Chinese media and Chinese social media. Apparently there were HIMARS missiles on that ship. And as I said, the Chinese seem to be tightening the screws on Taiwan. And Taiwan is a much more consequential place, ultimately, than even Venezuela is with all its oil.
All right, here we go.
The oil can be replaced.
Standalone complex, thank you for that. Jonathan says, is this the next phase of World War III with China?
Yeah, I mean, the US is obsessed with the challenge from China, and they don't want China interfering in the Western Hemisphere. They've said it.
Nico says, I'm sure the U.S. is afraid of China's exercises while they are delivering $11 billion worth of anti-shipping missiles to Taiwan via cargo planes.
Yes, I know, but we've seen that American missiles are not quite as effective as sometimes they're made out to be. So they don't. 11 billion in terms of missiles may seem like a lot. It isn't.
Standalone, thank you for that. Joker says, is there enough of Latin identity so South American countries can come together against U.S. aggression?
Well, at the moment, there are divisions within Latin America, and I think this is the thing people need to bear in mind. There are the Andes states, which have one particular position, and then there are the southern ones. At the moment, there is a swing to the right across Latin America. We see that with Milei, we see that with the recent elections in Bolivia and Chile. Left-wing governments have been economically unsuccessful recently, and so there is a swing to the right. The other thing to always understand about Latin America is that this is not a straightforward place where there is just everybody is united against the United States in the way that some people imagine. The United States has always had friends and supporters there in large numbers.
I don't know, though.
Nico says Russia is in the same boat. They are preparing another crooked
last game, so. The Tai Chi. Oh shit, my bad. I'm sitting here thinking, why are we playing? Cause there's no moves, man. Yeah, after this, I'm gonna look at the market. Alright, I'm wasting too much time. not playing good enough to be wasting that kind of time. Trade. Ooh. 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 I don't know what I want to do. Where's if I pull that for? There's a loss of tempo, but
What they ate for breakfast in the 1920s.
William Kellogg invented cornflakes because he couldn't get his patients to eat whole grain because
Welcome back. We are joined by Professor Jeffrey Sachs to discuss the U.S. attack on Venezuela and the kidnapping of its president, Maduro. So thank you very much for coming back on the program.
of course,
Yeah, so,
dramatic events.
Yeah, it's quite dramatic, and this, of course, was an actual unprovoked attack, an illegal attack as well. But the capture or arrest, as the media sometimes refer to it, as the president of Venezuela has been also quite dramatic. How are you assessing the situation, and what are the objectives of the United States here?
Well, clearly this is a blatantly illegal act, but it's one in a long line of blatantly illegal American actions. And just in the recent days, Trump has been threatening a new country every day. He bombed Nigeria last week. He said that the U.S. would intervene in Iran if the government acts against the protesters in a way that Trump doesn't like. He has invaded Venezuela. Just recently, he created a special envoy for Greenland, declaring that Greenland will be ours. So it's a threat against Europe, which of course Europe doesn't even acknowledge or recognize because it's so passive relative to the United States. We are not in a constitutional order in the United States. We are in an order led by a military state. We do not obey the U.S. Constitution. Everything is by executive decree. When a congressman dared to mention the U.S. Constitution today, Trump said, "What is he whining about? This is ridiculous." Well, this is really, at least what Trump has done is expose the fact that we're at the end of constitutional rule in the United States. What happens when there's a thuggish rule remains to be seen, but in my view, this makes the world extraordinarily dangerous. Of course, we're hardly at the end of the story about Venezuela itself. They have arrested a president, but this is not the end of anything. The whole history of U.S. regime change operations, which number probably around 100 such operations since the end of World War II, is a record of bloodshed, violence, deliberate creation of instability, coups, assassinations, civil war. So we don't know what will come next, but we know that there's been thuggery. It's also interesting, though it's maybe I don't have a definitive count of it, but I've not noticed any of the mainstream media in the United States even raising a question about this. The New York Times, the so-called paper of record, did not one time in recent weeks say, "Oh, it wouldn't be a good idea to brazenly attack that country." The editorial board was completely silent. As far as I can see, it remains silent. Our Congress is moribund. It doesn't exist, in fact, in any operational sense. So I find all of this very dramatic, and extremely worrisome. Though I hasten to repeat, we're not at the end of the story by any means of what will transpire in Venezuela itself. There is a government in place, there is a military, there is a mobilized part of society, there's lots of guns around. This is not a simple,
Three
smooth
misses.
takeover by the United States as much as Donald Trump might believe so.
Yeah, that long list of only the threats being made over the past few weeks is quite extraordinary. And we see Trump getting increasingly unhinged, not just at our domestic, but also at the international level. But the Europeans, though, the leaders, of Europe, have predictably showed their obedience and offered their support, making it clear they consider Maduro illegitimate and seeking, essentially to back the American position on this. But what does this mean for Latin America? Because in the U.S. national security strategy, it outlined clearly that this was, well, more or less America's backyard now, and it wanted other great powers out, and the U.S. should reign supreme. Is this something, a warning for what's to come in other places in Latin America as well?
Well, first, let me say a word about Europe. It's a very sad day for your country, Glenn. I think we can rename the Nobel Peace Prize as the Nobel War Prize. It was given to a person this year who called for exactly what has happened today, who called for a military strike by the United States on Venezuela. It came to pass. This is a tragedy for countries, governments, and institutions that once upon a time talked about international law. The European response has been,
Grainger knows that if you're a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility and your machinery isn't working,
pathetic. Absolutely
What is the
pathetic.
trick here?
Of course, every leader in Europe seems to cower to the U.S., to be terrified. The strongest statements were, we hope that this will return to stability soon, not any kind of shock of a brazen attack against the international order, against the UN Charter, against peace itself. So this is the world that we're in right now. Europe varies between complete vassalage and acquiescence to the U.S. or its own warmongering when it comes to Russia. There seems to be no diplomacy, no peace, and no attachment to multilateralism or to the UN Charter. You don't see it anywhere. When it comes to Latin America, of course, Trump has been openly saying that the United States rules the Western Hemisphere. It will dictate the terms. He has said today, basically, I don't have the direct quotation because I'm halfway around the world, but I saw the wire notice that Trump said, well, the oil is ours. This is a grab for Venezuelan oil. He said our companies will go back in and do business in Venezuela. It could not be crasser or cruder. And we've been there before in this kind of world. We have had a world of sheer imperialism that it was not in any way tempered or bound by international law, and it led to 2 world wars and
I was just about to say I should be able to finish this game off.
unconscionable, unimaginable loss of life. So we've been in this kind of situation before. We've never been in this kind of lawlessness in the nuclear age, however, and I think that this is just extraordinarily worrisome to have an unhinged, undisciplined, crude bully absolutely lawless, absolutely disrespectful of any norms as President of the United States, and to have no counterweight whatsoever in Europe, not a voice for decency or international law.
We're getting off.
And
Eat.
for the rest of the